So in this video, I'm going to be adding some zombie space marines to my Chaos army, which involves a lot of white armor and gold trim, but in a pretty easy to do way. So recently I started out painting this Chaos army, which is basically turned into chaotic white scars, and I really like it. A friend of mine wanted to start collecting Warhammer after we played a few games, and this was the scheme that he asked to go for. So these models are by Station Forge, and I really like them. They do all the standard like Chaos Space Marines that you'd expect, like the Possessed and just your normal Traitor. But these were a little bit different. They're zombies. So normally you get things like your Plague Bearers, or you get like your zombie and mutated Guardsmen and stuff like that. But I really like the idea of having these zombie Space Marines. So basically, instead of being corrupted and turning traitor, these are just dead Space Marines that have turned into these zombies. I just like it. It makes sense. I just think this is a great little idea. So I printed off a little batch of these, and there's a whole bunch of different ones that you can get. They're all modular, so you can change out all the weapons and all the arms and everything else like that. And they're great fun. They're close enough just to your normal Space Marines as well, so if you're wondering, how close do they get to like Space Marine armor, it's close enough, and you can have a lot of fun with these. Now, the previous stuff I've done is by Gamuk, and again, these fit quite nicely with those, so there's not too much difference. And at the end of the day, they're going to be zombies and covered in gore and stuff, so it doesn't really matter too much. The thing I really like about these is, like on the arms and bits of the legs and stuff, there's loads of bits where the armor's been ripped away, along with all the flesh and stuff like that, so you can get nice and gory with these. So first thing was get them all printed off, getting all cleaned up and cured and all of that jazz, and then glued together. I selected these 5 just to start off with as like my test ones, put them together, and then took them over to my airbrush booth. Now with this scheme, it is really simple and easy to do, and you can make loads of mistakes throughout it, and it doesn't really matter, so don't worry. And I've always been scared of trim. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't done Chaos Space Marines, because there's a lot of trim. And on these, it's exactly the same. But with this method, it doesn't matter how sloppily you paint them, it's not really going to matter too much when you get to the end. I primed all of these pure white. I just didn't bother with a Xenophil because that's going to get taken care of at a later stage, so I wasn't too worried about that. So I primed them all white, let them dry, and then took them over to the painting table. At this stage, the first thing to do was to pop on all the gold. And for this, I was just using one of the Army Painter Speed Paint Golds because it's a really nice thin down consistency. It goes on there, looks nice and vibrant, it's easy to work with, and you pretty much only need 1 coat of this. If you are using it over Xenophil Prime though, it doesn't always come through as nice and vibrant, so just bear that in mind. That's one of the reasons I went for pure white with these. Once that was done, I used some silvers and stuff like that on like the guns, the bolters, bits of the helmets. They've got some of these spikes on there as well, so I just added some more metallics. And then it was across onto all the gory bits. So they've got things like their intestines showing on some of these. A lot of the faces are kind of showing as well, and they're all like rotten and skeletal. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you've got a lot of the arm pieces as well that are like showing through, with just loads of bone and gore. Now, for this, I wanted something really vibrant. So my mix for this is using 2 types of speed paint. So Familiar Pink and a Desolation Brown or Desolate Brown. Now, basically pop both of these down onto your wet palette, onto a palette, or whatever you're using. You can thin them down if you want to, and just work back and forth. So I dab a little bit of the pink on there, then I dab a little bit of the brown on there, and mix them together, and don't let them dry. One mistake you can make with this is putting all the pink on all your models first, and then going back in with the brown afterwards. But by the time you get round to doing the second colour, they've probably dried. So work on one model at a time, don't clean your brush in between bits, and it gets a really nice effect. It just helps a lot of that pink to merge in with the brown and vice versa as well. You get some really nice mix on the model, and it just helps to not have that like stark line between them, and it's really easy and effective to do. It also adds some of that vibrancy because obviously we've got a lot of white, got a lot of gold. It starts to look pretty cold as we're going through it, but then you get this almost like hot pink in there with some of that brown in there to add that decay onto it. Now once that was done, it was over onto the bit where we can hide all our mistakes. Like I mentioned, if you're doing the trim and stuff like that, chances are you're gonna make mistakes. Don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter how sloppy you are because we're going to cover that up now with the oil wash. So grabbing myself a brown oil and some white spirits, thin it down, and in this example I thinned it down too much. So you want to slop it on there, and ideally you want it to kind of cover up all the surfaces. Depends what sort of look you're going for. With these, it wasn't too bad because it just gave them this almost like washed out dirty white, and it helped to hide a lot of those areas where I didn't want that gold to show through. But if you wanted them to look really dark and dirty, you want to really thicken that oil wash off. I didn't go back in and clean it up, but what you can do is after about 15 to 20 minutes, if you've got too much of that wash on like the surface of an area, you can go back in and rub it off with like a makeup sponge or a sponge or anything like that. If it's hardened and dried too much, just reactivate it using a bit of white spirit on the end of your sponge, and you can wipe it off the surface if you want to. For these, I didn't do any of the cleanup because they're just dirty, dirty zombies, so I could leave them like that. You then need to leave it to dry. Don't do anything too drastic with these because it's still drying at this stage. You don't want to be getting that oil wash or any of the oil paint onto your normal traditional brushes because it can be an absolute pain and it will destroy your brushes. I have dedicated brushes that I use for my oil washing, and if you mix and match between them and your acrylic brushes, you're going to have a bit of a disaster down the line. Once that was done, I went back in there with some traditional Nuln Oil and I put it around on, like, they've got the, I don't know, the rubbery bits between the like armor and all of that. So I slapped it on there around some of the faces as well, just to get some separation between some of those colors, just to darken it in around where like the intestines meet the armor and stuff. Over the weapons too, I put a bit more onto it. So anywhere where I just wanted a little bit more shadow, dropped in some Nuln Oil. And then it was across onto the eyes. I'm not sold on the eyes. I probably need to do a bit more with this, but I used some contrast paint, Carandrous Green, and I just gradually dropped it into all of the eye sockets. Now, they don't have many eyes left on these. They are mostly just eye sockets, but I wanted it to have a bit of a warp glow to it. So I just kept dropping this in there, darkening it in the middle, and then just getting it a little bit lighter on the outside. It looks okay as a glow, but I could definitely do a bit more work with it. Obviously, at this stage, they're looking pretty good, but they're not looking gory enough. So for the next stage, to get some blood spatter on there, all I did was took a Blood for the Blood God technical paint and an old toothbrush. What we do is get some of that Blood for the Blood God technical paint onto the toothbrush and pull the bristles back and then let go, and it sprays it really nicely. I was used to try and dab it on there, but then it just looks like a goopy mess. It doesn't look like natural way blood would spatter. Whereas when you sprinkle it and you just pull back those bristles and you keep flicking it at the model, you get all this spatter all over them. And I think that's great because that way it looks like they've ripped something open and it's sprayed them instead of just having all these like gunks of gore and stuff like that on there. And once they were done, I hit them all with a satin varnish. I love this. It just helps to blend the whole thing together and protect it at the same time. And I called them done. And that was them done. And I really, really like these. I think for core infantry to add to that Chaos Army, I think they're looking great, and I could do a whole bunch of these, and because I can have all these different poses, I think they'll look really, really good fun. There's a whole bunch of other Chaos stuff that I want to play with. Gamuk does a whole load of stuff, and Station Forge is doing a whole load of stuff as well at the moment. So throw down in the comments if there's anything you'd like me to paint up in this scheme or have a play with, and also as well if there's anything you want me to pick up from Games Workshop to add to this army. So hopefully you've enjoyed that video, and fingers crossed I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Ta-ra!